And welcome in. It's Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda. James Merilatt in for Cecil Lammy. Andrew Mason is here as always. Mason, I don't know how it is where you are, but all of a sudden we're in Seattle here in Denver. It's been nonstop rain for like 24 hours. I don't know how people put up with it. It drives me crazy.
You know what? That's actually maybe aside from the hail, but the nonstop rain that you had in Denver this week, that's actually pretty common in the Midwest and in the Pacific Northwest. Yet where I am in Wisconsin right now, Madison, Wisconsin, it is sunny and 75 degrees today. Now,
Well,
we are having a rainy weekend coming up. So I think some of what you guys have had in Colorado is headed this way toward us. I'm going to get in a, you know, weather forecaster mode. All the moisture coming up out of the Gulf. It's going to mix at high altitudes.
Well, yeah, and it's supposed to
Yeah.
be like this for like 8 days. I mean, I'm gonna
Yeah.
have a hard time keeping my normal, sunny, upbeat disposition, but I will do my best. All right,
Uh,
so it is one of my favorite days of the year, Mace. It's the day the Broncos schedule comes out, and I know there's this group of people. We'll start seeing them at like 6 o'clock on social media, making fun of those of us who get into schedule release day. Listen, if you don't care about it because you already knew who they were going to play, that's fine. I think it's fascinating to see kind of what the pecking order is. I think there are things you can learn from the schedule in terms of maybe how the rest of the league views the Broncos,
mhm.
how much of a marquee attraction are they expected to be. And it maps out my fall, right? Like you go to every game, home and road. So it really maps out your fall. But it
Yeah.
sort of tells me, hey, where am I going to spend certain weekends? Where
Mhm.
can I plan my Bronco bye week trip to Vegas with my buddies, that kind of stuff. It's a big day for me. How about you?
It's a big day for me, and the thing is, the sooner we know and can get things finalized, the more money you can save. I mean, some of the things that we've already learned, I've literally already kind of looked to see. Okay, we have learned reportedly that the Broncos are going to play a Thursday night game in Week 6 in Kansas City, and so I'm thinking, okay, fine. That's a mini buy. What can I do with that weekend? After I'm probably just gonna spend some time with the family, maybe go to a college football game that weekend after that. Look, most players and coaches will also tell you the first thing they look for is the buy. We don't yet know the buy based on anything that's out there, but that's the first thing they look for is that respite. And sort of based on what we've learned so far, either that buy is going to be early or it's going to come up. It appears in November because we see you got that Thursday night game, Kansas City on October the 12th, and then a couple of home games, Green Bay and Kansas City to round out the month. So if the buy is not really early, it looks like the Broncos are headed toward November buy, and that's the first thing everybody looks at. Second thing you look at is who do you open up with. Third thing you look at is okay, what's the Thursday night game, and then you look at holidays. And we're going to get into that because we know some Bronco holiday dates. And at least on a couple of holidays or around a couple of holidays, thankfully, Broncos aren't getting on a plane this year.
All right, so let's start with what we do know. Now, nothing has come out from the Broncos officially.
Right.
Nothing has come from anybody who covers the team closely. It's not like we're getting, Mike Kliss reporting who they're playing on certain weeks. We're kind of having to piece it together from leaks around the league, right? We've seen, I think the Packers' entire schedule has been leaked. The Chiefs' entire schedule. The league has released some of the holiday ones. So I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to follow it today.
Yeah.
I felt like, the guy in A Beautiful Mind, I couldn't keep track of what all was happening. So you're smarter than me, Mace. You've been tracking it. What do we know for sure, or at least relatively for sure, at this point, about 2 hours and 25 minutes before it's all official?
Well, it's interesting. There's actually a Twitter feed called Nerding on NFL that is keeping a Google Doc on this. And so
Okay.
they're keeping it updated. And so looking at it right now, and these are just various leaks popping around the league, we're able to piece together as of this moment 10 of the weeks. Okay.
10.
Including
Okay.
week 1. And according to some leaks and reports, and I think there's also some process of elimination going on here, but the Broncos opener per a couple of reports is going to be at home against the Las Vegas Raiders in week 1.
Wow. Okay.
So
Fun way to open. Do we know a date? Is that like the Sunday afternoon game?
It has to be a Sunday afternoon game because we know the Sunday game, I think that's Sunday night game is Giants Cowboys. Monday night is Bills against the New York Jets. And then we know the Thursday game is Detroit at Kansas City. So it will be a Sunday afternoon game for the Broncos in week 1. And I'll tell you, if that's the case, if this proves to be accurate, I like that opener to the start of the season.
Me too.
You played well against Jimmy Garoppolo when he came in with the 49ers last year. The Raiders, I mean, you've got a losing streak to them. The Broncos have lost 6 in a row, 7 of the last 8, yada, yada, yada. It has not gone well for the Broncos against the Raiders. But at home, I think it's a good chance against a Raider team that doesn't have Darren Waller coming back. I think that's a huge loss for those guys. I think it's a chance for the Broncos to start off 1-0 and build some confidence if that's the case.
So that must be a relatively recent leak because I hadn't even seen that as I was trying to piece it together. So
we actually have the entirety of week 1 that's bled out right now. So what we knew, of course, about the Chiefs taking on the Lions elsewhere in the AFC West, and also the Chargers will host the Miami Dolphins in week 1. So I would say for the Chargers and the Chiefs, they're tough games, but they're games being at home, I think both teams expect to win.
Yeah, and I think really the two interesting places, and what you touched on is right. Holidays, where's the bye week, all of those kind of things. But it's also, what is it at the beginning, right? Can you get off to a good start, especially a team that's coming off a 5-12 season, team with a new head coach? Like, can you kind of build some momentum? And then how does it end, right? Yeah. So you look at it and say, man, if they're playing 3 out of 4 games on the road to end it, boy, you better build up a pretty good record before you get to that stretch. So we know week 1, I'm with you. I think the Raiders to start here in Denver, it's a non-playoff team. They've got a new quarterback. That is it's not going to be in prime time, so you don't get all the spotlight. That to me is a very winnable game. I'm not going to go ahead and predict it or anything yet, but that seems winnable out of the gate. Good way for Sean Payton to start. What else do you know beyond week 1? Kind of what are the other dominoes that can fall here?
Well, we then don't know anything until we get to October, and we get to week 6, Thursday night at Kansas City, like I mentioned earlier. Yes. Now, it's interesting on the Chiefs. The Broncos, according to multiple reports, will face the Chiefs twice in a 3-week span in October. So on the positive side, they're done with the Chiefs before Halloween. And based on what we know about when the first Raiders game is, the Broncos have at least half of their AFC West games before Halloween. So whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage, I think just depends on how quickly the Broncos can get up to speed. But I think it is an advantage having Kansas City out of the way. We're not talking about one of those dreaded late season trips to Arrowhead that have become so familiar for the Broncos over the last several years. You're getting it done first half of the season. I even like having the road Chiefs game be first. You go against them, you learn what you have to do, what you have to tweak. And then I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Broncos come back there in week 8 at home and beat the Chiefs. Sandwiched in between is a game against Green Bay. And that's one of those games. There are some games on the schedule where I'm like, I don't know what to expect. Green Bay is one of them because it's all about Jordan Love. If Love is as good as the Packers internally believe he is, then you're talking about maybe a tough game there. Love isn't ready for prime time. That's a game in week 7 at home at 2:25 Mountain Time there on October the 22nd that you expect to win.
So essentially to end the first half of the season, roughly, can't do it exactly given the 17 games now, but it's at Kansas City on a Thursday night. Tough that you got to travel for a Thursday game, but okay, it is what it is. Colts came in here last year on a Thursday night and won an ugly game. So you got that. Then you got the Packers at home. You got the Chiefs at home. So that gets us to November.
Yep.
That would be a great time to have the bye. That's about when they had it last year. I think the game in London was week 8. So they played 8 games, had the bye, and then played 9. That would be ideal. Do we know anything yet for the second half of the schedule of what's come into place?
Well, We don't know about week 9. And so, yeah, maybe that is a good time for the bye after Kansas City, because immediately on the other side of that, you get to week 10. So we don't know week 9 yet. But again, great time for the bye, halfway point roughly. Week 10 is at Buffalo. And according to some reports, that appears to be a Monday night game in Buffalo. Buffalo crowds are always raucous. Buffalo in prime time, it's going to be a lubricated bunch there. Now, here's the one weird thing that could come into play. You're facing the Bills in November, and that is a time of year where the weather really starts to get interesting in Western New York in particular, because you're always at the point where Lake Erie has not frozen over yet. And that's when you get those lake effect snows that twice in the last 10, 12 years have forced the Bills to move a game across the Great Lakes to Detroit to play a home game because their stadium was snowed in. And so that's a rogue element there that it has the fact that it's come up multiple times in the last generation or so means it's something that you can't necessarily dismiss as a possibility. And certainly, who knows, the weather gods might do you a favor and say you're going to go play that game under a roof in Detroit rather than in Buffalo. But if you do play in Buffalo, weather almost certainly will be a factor. You're talking about wind, you're talking about rain, maybe some snow. If you get a 35-degree night, you are taking it and running and being happy with it. But it's one of those things. Could be good, could be bad. It could be good. You might get lucky, but if you have a bad weather night, that hurts you, because Josh Allen, one of the reasons the Bills drafted him was because of the strong arm, high velocity on his passes, and the ability to throw passes that can cut through the wind and foul conditions there in Western New York better than that of other quarterbacks.
So you're telling me there's actually a better chance early November than a late December game of there being a big, huge storm because of the lake effect, which I've heard of the lake effect. Right. I didn't know that had anything to do with Lake Erie being frozen over. You taught me something already today, Mace.
It all depends on that. Because when the lake freezes over, what can build the moisture there that rides into Western New York, and particularly if those snowstorms in the Buffalo area are highly localized, like downtown Buffalo might get 6 inches, and Orchard Park, about 15 miles south of the city, might get 2.5 feet.
Okay.
It's really kind of compressed and hyper local in terms of how it works. So you've gotten into the time of the year where you're talking about a major dice roll there on the weather. Not that you might not get snow when it gets later, but usually if it's a cold winter and Lake Erie is freezing over it at some point by late December, usually the faucet gets turned off on those lake effect storms. But that's something to keep an eye on.
Now that would be like if you want to go to Buffalo and get the full Buffalo experience.
Yeah.
A night game, Bills Mafia, you mentioned it. They're going to be raring to go.
Not a lot of work's getting done in Buffalo that day.
No, or the day after. Yeah. So Monday and Tuesday are holidays in Buffalo that week. And, getting in and out of there could be a little bit of trouble because it's, the weather. But if you're in Buffalo, if you're going to go to a Buffalo game, you don't want to sit out and have to put on sunscreen. You got to bundle up and get ready for it. Okay, so that's week 10.
Yes.
So that gives us 5 games we know. What else we got after that?
Week after that, week 11, according to multiple reports, this was out earlier this morning. This was Minnesota at Denver on Sunday Night Football. So here we are. Mike Klis has talked about expect the maximum or close to the maximum in terms of primetime games for the Broncos. Here's another primetime game that we know, Sunday Night Football against Minnesota. And that's another team that they were 13-4 last year, but they had a negative point differential.
Yep.
And an awful defense that personnel-wise does not appear to be much better than it was at the end of last season, even though they changed defensive coordinators. Ed Donatel, former Broncos assistant, is out after he got sacked after the season. So because of that, Minnesota, that's a game where I think you might be facing a team that's right there scuffling around 500 because they are, statistically speaking, a prime regression candidate.
Yeah, when you look at it and try and figure out, hey, who could go from bad to good and who could go from good to bad, you want to look at who had lopsided records in one-score games. I think the Vikings were 11-0 at one point in one-score games last year. They might have finished that. The Broncos were the opposite, right? They were terrible in one-score games. So those could be two ships passing in the night, and we may see one go from 13-4 to look. I don't think they're going to flip that and be 4-13, but they'd be maybe more of a 500 type team. Broncos could be going from 5-12 to flirting with double-digit wins. So that's an interesting one. Sunday Night Football. After it'll be a short week. Got to come back from Buffalo, back-to-back primetime games. So hopefully the Broncos are better playing better football this year than they did last year, because that'll be 2 weeks in a row. America will get to see them. All right. So what's after that? That's week 11. We've still got 7 weeks to go here.
Yeah, we don't. So we don't have anything yet on week 12, 13, or 14. Week 12 is Thanksgiving weekend.
Okay.
Now that could be a bye. That's again, right now we're looking in terms of realistic bye possibilities. We're looking at week 4, week 5, week 9, and then week 12, week 13. And last year the byes did go into December. So
that's late though. Boy, that's a late bye.
It is a late bye, but then you get that freshening up for the stretch run. And honestly, if you're not going to play on Thanksgiving, a great time to have a bye would be Thanksgiving week. So who knows? Let's maybe knock on wood here. That's what happens. So we don't know week 12. We don't know week 13. We don't know week 14. We get to week 15. That's December 17th. And that weekend is going to be at Detroit. You talk about a game that could, some games might be easier than they seem based on the records last year. Detroit 9-8, and the league put them in that prime Thursday night game to open the season at Kansas City.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody outside of Michigan expects the Lions to win, but you wouldn't be putting them there if you didn't expect a good game. The expectations for Detroit are pretty high. It's a wide open NFC North, and the Broncos are playing every NFC North team this year. It's a division that may well be impossible to forecast, because even like the Bears, they had the league's worst record last year, but Justin Fields looked pretty good when he was healthy.
Yep.
And they've brought in a lot of new players. Of course, they made that trade down in the draft. The roster has been regenerated. Wouldn't it all surprise anybody, I think, if Chicago made that run? And we're talking about whenever that game happens being a tough game. But Detroit appears, even though they made a curious move at running back, I think, they basically tried to fix what wasn't broken in the backfield in the draft. It's a team that appears to be very much on the ascent. And you start looking at the pieces they cobbled together in drafts in recent years, they've got some premium guys there. And so that there in week 15, you're hoping it's two teams battling for the playoffs. I expect Detroit's going to be very much in the playoff conversation in a weak NFC. And you just hope the Broncos are also in that conversation as well.
I was hoping to be able to pair that game up with going to watch Michigan at the Big House. So December 17th, not going to work. It's too late. Misses by a few weeks. So that's okay. My own personal planning got blown up, but that's okay.
Maybe the Avs will play the Wings that weekend. Who knows? Now that if the NHL wants to do us all a solid, they'll have the Avs play there on Saturday night and then the Bronco game on Sunday.
Yep. Because I got to admit, Detroit, not the most beautiful place in the world to visit. Detroit in December, not good at all. Okay, so that gets us to the last 3 games. Are those all divisional games? Is that how it still sets up?
The last game has to be a divisional game.
Okay.
The others before that do not. And so we get to Christmas Eve, week 16, and the Broncos are at home. I mean, I think if you're looking at one thing that you like compared to some past years, based on what we have learned, what has dripped out, one thing you do like is home on Christmas Eve, home on New Year's Eve. Back-to-back home games, Christmas Eve against the New England Patriots. And I think I referenced it in my piece when I was ranking the possible primetime games, and the Patriots game's pretty low. I mean, I think this game, with all due respect to Spiro Ditas, Andrew Catalon, it's probably got their names written all over it. I don't think anybody expects very much from the Patriots this year, and the Broncos could go either way. I think best case scenario for these two teams in this game is they're through 14 games. That you got a couple of 8 and 6 teams that are fighting for one of those last wild card spots. I think if both teams are there, they'd have to be pretty happy with how the season went for themselves.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the Broncos' opponents, which we knew prior to today, and you were trying to say, hey, what are a couple of them you could put late in the year to maybe give you some games that nothing's a layup in the NFL. It's not college football, but one that you look at and say, hey, that could be very winnable if you need to stack a couple of victories. Detroit's going to be better, but it's not like, they're getting Green Bay over the last 3 years coming in here late in the season. New England, a Bill Belichick coach team is always going to be fine, but Mac Jones and company don't really scare anybody. So that's Christmas Eve. That's a Sunday, even though it's Christmas Eve, it's Sunday. So I'm assuming that's a 205, 225 game. We can all go, have Santa and eggnog and everything after that. So it doesn't really interfere with plans all that much. Then New Year's Eve is also at home. What is that game looking like it's going to be?
That looks like it's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers coming in here. So that's one. Okay. The Patriots is one I think you expect to win. Although, I mean, the variable is what's going on at quarterback, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, however that ends up coming out. I don't think either of them scare anybody. But you get to the Chargers here, and the Chargers are really interesting. They've had a fascinating offseason. Of course, they move on from Joe Lombardi, their offensive coordinator. He was basically the scapegoat for the collapse in Jacksonville back in January. And they turn around, they bring in Kellen Moore from Dallas, and Kellen's going to have free reign to run things out there. That's if you look at the AFC West, that's one of the rogue elements in there that could change things. You think, okay, what could pick the lock that Kansas City has atop the division? It's if Kellen Moore introduces some more vertical concepts to the Chargers, taking advantage of Justin Herbert's arm talent. And does that open things up? They added a receiver in the draft. Their tight end position is still a little bit shaky, but 1, 2, 3 at wide receiver, they're as strong as anybody when healthy in the NFL. And so that's one. If you're looking at these final 3 games, and we'll get to week 18, and that's at Las Vegas. But if you're looking at these final 3 games, I think you're saying, okay, we feel pretty good if we need to win 2.
Yep.
If you need to win all 3 with the Chargers coming in, that might be a tough road against what LA is going to bring this year.
Yeah, you get LA though coming here. Weather's going to be, it'll at least be cold on New Year's Eve. That's a Sunday as well, so I assume that'll be an afternoon game at Empower Field. So yeah, I'm with you. You want to look at that and say, hey, can you win 2 of your last 3? I think that's certainly doable. So if you're looking to book your trip to Vegas for that game, it's what, January 7th?
January 7th is the game day. Yep. So that's what you're closing with.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Christmas rush has ebbed a little bit. It's a nice time of year to go to Vegas. I mean, you're not going to go swimming, unfortunately. I was sort of hoping
it's not full weather, Mace.
I know. Yeah, I was hoping for an early season Vegas. Maybe it's funny. Maybe we'll get early season Houston, because I showed my daughter a picture of that lazy river that they have at one of the hotels in downtown Houston. I'm like, maybe we'll do a family trip down there and go bob along the lazy river in downtown Houston. Who knows?
Well, and that touches on the games we don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know Houston.
We don't know at Chicago, right? We don't know when Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett are coming here. I thought that might be week 1. That's now going to be Monday. The Jets are playing Monday night, week 1, at home against the Bills, I believe, right? That's September 11th. I think if we'd have looked at the calendar, it makes sense for New York to be playing at home on September 11th. So we don't know the Jets. We don't know at the Chargers. We don't know at Miami. We don't know Washington here. We don't know at Houston. What am I missing? Feels like there's one other game where we don't quite.
Let me go back. Let me go back through them here. Houston. We don't know Houston.
Yep.
We don't know at Miami.
Yep.
We don't know at LA. We don't know Washington home. We don't know at Chicago. Yeah, I think.
Don't they have Cleveland at home too?
Cleveland at home. That's what we're missing. We don't know Yeah, we do not know Cleveland at home, and I'm kind of taking a look here. I was looking at the Jets, for example, what we know about the Jets, and looking at this spreadsheet. Based on what we know about the Jets, that game would have to be week 5 or week 13 or week 14.
Okay, so week 5 would be right before they got to turn around and go to Kansas City on a short week.
I think you'd rather not have that.
Yep, for sure. Week 13. So you said week 13 and 14?
Those are both in early December, yes, early to mid. Okay. So that'd be December 3rd or December 10th.
I would be surprised if the league waits that long, because that game could be a stinker by then, right? Yeah. Like, I think you want to get Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers when there's still plenty of people believing Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers teams are going to be good. A little bit like last year with Seattle, but that's just my guess. So, all right, so it's actually started to come together pretty well, Mace. We had more games than we thought. Are we sure that opener is going to be the Raiders here? Pretty confident in that?
Pretty confident. I mean, that the one post that was out there basically went through the whole of week 1. So I mean, I'd say I'm not 100% confident in it, but this one source seemed to nail things last year. So,
and then we've got 3 primetime games that we know so far, right? Thursday at the Chiefs, Sunday night here against the Vikings, Monday night. These aren't in the right order, but Monday night at Buffalo.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I heard Kliss on with Stokely and Zach today, and he said expect the Broncos to be right near that maximum. That would suggest there's maybe a couple more primetime games coming.
Yeah. Now, one thing on Detroit, for example, that may be a game where they have some flexibility to move it to Saturday. And that's something to kind of bear in mind, that you get toward the end of the season, particularly in week 15. And I'm not sure if this is the case for week 17 as well, around New Year's Eve, but in week 15, you're going to have the ability to take some games and move them to Saturday. We saw this, for example, with the Broncos Chiefs in week 18, 2021 season. Broncos Browns back in 2018, December of that year, a couple weeks before the end of the season. So Detroit, if they denote that game as a potential flex to Saturday, that's one to keep your eye on. That may well end up being on Saturday if both teams are in the mix.
Okay. Boy, piecing it together, my assignment tonight will be all over at DenverBroncos.com. My assignment tonight is to come up with the best road trips.
Yes.
I'm going to have to scramble a little bit. The Raider game's the last game of the year. The Bills game is in November. Detroit is in mid-December. I really need Houston to be, hey, you can see the Astros on a Friday night. You can go to Texas A&M on a Saturday and then hit the Broncos on Sunday. Like, I need some of these to come together. And maybe that Charger game works with going and seeing Caleb Williams in USC.
Maybe. And another one to check out, if we're just talking about overall quality of road trip, is Miami. And we're looking here. Could be week 3. Okay, it's hot, but then you just give yourself a beach and pool vacation, right?
Yeah.
If that happens. That's if you go in September, that's great. The water's warm. It's fabulous. Just stay cool by the pool. We fast forward on Miami here. The next possibility for the Broncos that lines up would be one of those 2 December games. So basically, Miami is either going to be week 3 when you just stay cool by the pool, or one of those first 2 weeks in December when it's just glorious. You're escaping the cold. It's probably snowed a few times in Colorado by that point. You just go down, pack your full of shirts and have a grand time. So
okay, that's good. A little beach vacation, I can work that in. Normally, I'm trying to pair them with other sporting events. It may just be, hey, let's go hit the surf.
Yeah, Chicago is also one, because looking at the possibilities on Chicago, potentially week 2, potentially week 4, and potentially the first week in November. And then looks like potentially week 13. So,
well, week 2 and week 4, you could get the trifecta of Cubs, Notre Dame, Broncos, Bears. So that is something I will definitely dive into. Well, Mace, thank you for piecing all of this together.
Yep.
It's kind of a fun practice as you're trying to get different leaks from different places, and the fact that somebody's putting together the spreadsheet to me is comical. We'll know for sure in 2 hours. Make sure you tune into 104.3 The Fan. Will Peterson and I will be breaking it down, going through the whole schedule once it's official, and then I'm sure you and Cease will do it all here tomorrow on Orange and Blue Today.
All right. We'll have plenty to chop up, and we're going to be chopping up over the next few weeks as well as we go game by game through the schedule. And hey, we've known the who, we've known the where, and we're going to know the when. And look, as we talked about with the Chiefs earlier in the show, the when does matter.
It does.
Determining what we expect from this Broncos team in 2023.
It does. We can start mapping out our fall and winter. It's always an exciting day. All right, Mace, great job. As always, appreciate everybody joining us. It's Orange and Blue Today, presented by Sean Ponda.